This is Deuteronomy chapter 30. 2 chapters ago, Moses delivered the blessing and the curse, blessings for obedience and curses for disobedience. Now he's about to address the distant future. He's telling them what they should expect when foreign nations attack them and remove them from the promised land. The first sentence is a prophecy that's phrased in such a way as to indicate it's definitely going to happen. Verse 1, "It shall happen when all these things have come on you, the blessing and the curse which I have set before you, and you shall call them to mind among all the nations where Yahweh your God has driven you, and return to Yahweh your God, and obey his voice according to all that I command you today, you and your children, with all your heart and with all your soul, that then Yahweh your God will release you from captivity, have compassion on you, and will return and gather you from all the peoples where Yahweh your God has scattered you." Comment: we learned several things are definitely going to happen. Israel will definitely disregard Yahweh's commandments in the promised land to the point that Yahweh will expel them from the land and send them into multiple foreign lands. Verse 1, quote, "all the nations where Yahweh your God has driven you," end quote. Verse 2, during the dispersion, Israelites within those multiple nations will definitely return to Yahweh with all heart and soul. Verse 3, Yahweh will gather them again from all the nations and return them to the promised land. Now, as we go on, we start to hear some ifs, so the next few statements are conditional prophecy. Verse 4, "If your outcasts are in the uttermost parts of the heavens, from there Yahweh your God will gather you, and from there he will bring you back. Yahweh your God will bring you into the land which your fathers possessed, and you will possess it." Comment: no matter how far and wide the Israelites may be scattered, Yahweh will bring them back to the promised land. Going on, "He will do you good and increase your numbers more than your fathers." Comment: here comes the most remarkable part, which predicts an event that has not yet occurred to this day. Verse 6, "Yahweh your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your offspring to love Yahweh your God with all your heart and with all your soul, that you may live." Comment: it says Yahweh will circumcise your heart. This has never yet happened to Israel. In New Testament times, Paul said, quote, "To this day, when Moses is read, a veil lies on their heart." 2 Corinthians 3:15. After that, in 70 AD, Yahweh expelled Israel from the Promised Land at the hand of Roman Emperor Vespasian. But starting in 1948, Jews reestablished a state in the Promised Land. But all these years since the days of Paul, we have not yet seen that circumcision of the Jewish heart take place on a large scale, that lifting of the veil that would be indicated by an acceptance of Jesus as the Messiah. But verse 2 says it will happen, a return to Yahweh with all heart and soul. So I think we're reading a prophecy here that's still future, and we may even be seeing the beginning stages of it now, with many Jews, not a majority, but many coming to an acceptance of the Messiah. It's a subject of abundant treatment in other prophetic passages. Romans 11:26, quote, "all Israel will be saved." Hosea 3:5, quote, "afterward the children of Israel shall return and seek Yahweh their God and David their king, and shall come with trembling to Yahweh and to his blessings in the last days," end quote. Hosea wrote that long after the death of David, so it wasn't actually David he was indicating, but the heir to David's throne, the Messiah. So the verse indicates the children of Israel will seek Yahweh their Messiah and come to him with trembling in the last days. Ezekiel 34:13, this is Yahweh speaking of Israel, quote, "I will bring them out from the peoples and gather them from the countries and will bring them into their own land. I will feed them on the mountains of Israel by the watercourses and in all the inhabited places of the country," end quote. Ezekiel 11:19 and 20, again, this is Yahweh speaking about Israel, quote, "I will give them one heart, and I will put a new spirit within you. I will take the stony heart out of their flesh, and will give them a heart of flesh, that they may walk in my statutes and keep my ordinances and do them. They will be my people, and I will be their God," end quote. Jeremiah 31:33, quote, "But this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yahweh. I will put my law in their inward parts, and I will write it in their heart. I will be their God, and they shall be my people," end quote. Jeremiah 32 verses 39 and 40, quote, I will give them one heart and one way, that they may fear me forever for their good and the good of their children after them. I will make an everlasting covenant with them, that I will not turn away from following them to do them good. I will put my fear in their hearts, that they may not depart from me. End quote. Ezekiel 39 verses 28 and 29, quote, They will know that I am Yahweh their God, and that I caused them to go into captivity among the nations, and have gathered them to their own land. Then I will leave none of them captive any more. I won't hide my face from them any more, for I have poured out my Spirit on the house of Israel, says the Lord Yahweh. End quote. And finally, this one, Ezekiel 36 verses 26 and 27, quote, I will also give you a new heart, and I will put a new spirit within you. I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and I will give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes. You will keep my ordinances and do them. End quote. So that was Moses, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Hosea, and Paul, all predicting what sounds like the same event. Hosea said it would occur in the last days, but what are the last days? As children might ask in the car, are we there yet? Yes, we are. Peter indicated that the last days were in progress on the day of Pentecost, Acts 2:17. So we're still in the last days, and we're looking for all Israel to be saved. Going on now, Moses is still speaking about the time when Israel comes to Yahweh with all their heart and soul. Verse 7, Yahweh your God will put all these curses on your enemies and on those who hate you, who persecute you. You shall return and obey Yahweh's voice and do all his commandments which I command you today. Yahweh your God will make you plenteous in all the work of your hand, in the fruit of your body, and in the fruit of your livestock, and in the fruit of your ground, for good. For Yahweh will again rejoice over you for good, as he rejoiced over your fathers, if you will obey Yahweh your God's voice, to keep his commandments and his statutes, which are written in this book of the law, if you turn to Yahweh your God with all your heart and with all your soul. Comment, here we may be reading about the millennial reign of Christ, because it hardly seems likely that all Israel will be saved as long as Satan is loose to deceive the nations. But during the millennial reign, Satan will be bound so that he cannot deceive, Revelation 20, verse 3. So perhaps we could better imagine a utopia such as this during that time. Now coming up, Moses switches gears, verse 11. For this commandment which I command you today is not too hard for you or too distant. It is not in heaven that you should say, Who will go up for us to heaven and bring it to us and proclaim it to us that we may do it? Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, Who will go over the sea for us and bring it to us and proclaim it to us that we may do it? But the word is very near to you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it. Comment, verse 11 is not too hard or too distant. You don't have to travel the world in search of it. Yahweh has delivered his word directly to you. Verse 15, Behold, I have set before you today life and prosperity, and death and evil. Comment, there's a clear dichotomous choice here. It's a choice between two opposites, life and prosperity on the one hand and death and evil on the other. Verse 16, For I command you today to love Yahweh your God, to walk in his ways, and to keep his commandments, his statutes, and his ordinances, that you may live and multiply, and that Yahweh your God may bless you in the land where you go in to possess it. But if your heart turns away, and you will not hear, but are drawn away and worship other gods and serve them, I denounce to you today that you will surely perish. You will not prolong your days in the land where you pass over the Jordan to go in to possess it. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. Therefore choose life that you may live, you and your descendants, to love Yahweh your God, to obey his voice, and to cling to him, for he is your life and the length of your days, that you may dwell in the land which Yahweh swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give them. Comment, that's the chapter. Deuteronomy 31 is next at landofhavilah.net. Deuteronomy 31.